At my 10-year high school reunion, my ex-friend Sarah announced to everyone that nobody actually likes you, they just pretend to be nice, and I was delusional about having real friends. I calmly pulled out my phone and read aloud messages from our group chat where everyone was discussing how toxic Sarah had become. What happened next destroyed her social reputation forever. Before I dive into this story of high school drama and the most satisfying social vindication imaginable, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever had former friends spread lies about your social life, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of toxic friendships getting exposed through their own evidence. My name is Megan, I'm 28 years old, and until my high school reunion last month, I believed that some friendships could survive any betrayal if you just tried hard enough. This story begins with a friendship that slowly turned toxic and ends with group chat screenshots that proved who my real friends actually were. Sarah and I were best friends throughout high school. We met freshman year in biology class and immediately bonded over shared interests in theater, music, and what we thought was a similar sense of humor about our classmates. For 4 years, Sarah and I were inseparable. We spent every weekend together, shared clothes and secrets, and planned to attend the same college so we could remain roommates and best friends forever. Sarah was charismatic, funny, and socially confident in ways that I admired. She could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention through storytelling, jokes, and an infectious energy that drew people toward her. I was quieter and more reserved, preferring deep conversations with small groups rather than entertaining large crowds. Sarah often positioned our friendship as her taking me under her wing socially and helping me navigate social situations that might otherwise intimidate me. "Megan's so lucky to have me," Sarah would joke to other friends. She'd be eating lunch alone every day if I hadn't adopted her. These comments seemed playful at the time, but they established a dynamic where Sarah was the social leader and I was her grateful follower who needed her guidance to maintain friendships with others. After graduation, Sarah and I attended different colleges despite our original plans. She went to a large state university where she joined a sorority and thrived in the party-oriented social scene. I chose a smaller liberal arts college that focused more on academics and close-knit community relationships. During college, our friendship began to change in subtle but significant ways. Sarah would call me to complain about her college friends while simultaneously bragging about her active social life and popularity on campus. "These girls are so fake," she'd say about her sorority sisters. "Not like our friendship, Megan. You're the only real friend I have." But Sarah's definition of our real friendship seemed to require that I always be available to listen to her problems while showing enthusiastic interest in her social successes. When I tried to share my own college experiences or talk about new friendships I was forming, Sarah would become dismissive or critical. "Your college sounds so boring," she'd say when I mentioned study groups or campus activities. "Those people probably aren't even real friends. They just hang out with you because you're nice to everyone." Sarah's comments about my new friendships became a recurring theme during our college phone calls. She seemed convinced that people couldn't genuinely like me for my own qualities, and that my social connections were based on convenience or pity rather than authentic affection. "Megan, you're so naive about people," Sarah would tell me. "You think everyone likes you, but most people are just being polite. You don't always pick up on social cues that show when people are just tolerating you." These conversations left me feeling confused and insecure about my ability to form genuine friendships. Sarah's confidence about social dynamics made me question my own perceptions about whether people actually enjoyed spending time with me. After college, Sarah moved back to our hometown while I relocated to Chicago for work. The distance made our friendship even more strained, as Sarah seemed to resent my decision to build a life outside our original social circle. "I guess you think you're too good for this town now," Sarah would say when I mentioned my life in Chicago. "It's easy to make friends when you're somewhere new and people don't know who you really are." Sarah's implication that my Chicago friendships were somehow less authentic than our high school relationships created ongoing tension between us. She seemed to believe that any social success I experienced away from her influence was artificial or temporary. Over the next few years, I built a strong network of friends in Chicago through work, hobbies, and mutual interests. I formed genuine connections with people who appreciated my humor, reliability, and enthusiasm for shared activities. But whenever I tried to share positive social experiences with Sarah, she would find ways to diminish them. "Work friends don't count," she'd say when I mentioned colleagues I'd grown close to. "They're just being nice because you have to see each other every day." "Hobby friends are so superficial," she'd comment about my running group or book club. "They only like you because you share one interest. Real friendships are deeper than that." Sarah's constant criticism of my social life began affecting my confidence even when she wasn't around. I started second-guessing whether my friends actually enjoyed my company or were just being polite out of obligation. 3 years ago, Sarah moved to Chicago for a job opportunity and suggested we should hang out more frequently now that we live in the same city again. I was excited about the possibility of reconnecting with Sarah while also introducing her to my Chicago friend group. I thought she would appreciate getting to know the people who had become important to me over the years. The integration did not go well. Sarah immediately began making critical comments about my Chicago friends, questioning their motives for spending time with me and pointing out what she perceived as flaws in their personalities. "Jessica seems fake," Sarah said after meeting one of my closest friends. "She's trying too hard to be liked. I can tell she doesn't actually care about you." "Your book club friends are pretentious," she observed after attending one gathering. "They're just showing off how intellectual they are. None of them would hang out with you outside of book discussions." Sarah's criticism extended to my social activities and the way I interacted with friends. "You laugh too much at other people's jokes," she told me after a group dinner. "It's obvious you're trying too hard to fit in. People can tell when you're being fake. You always offer to pay for things," she pointed out. "That's not friendship, that's you buying people's attention because you don't think they'd spend time with you otherwise." Sarah's observations made me increasingly self-conscious about my social interactions. I began analyzing every conversation and activity, wondering if Sarah was right about my friends' motives or my own behavior. The situation came to a head 6 months ago when Sarah began actively trying to interfere with my friendships. She would make plans with me during events she knew I'd been looking forward to with other friends, then act hurt when I chose to keep my original commitments. "I guess your new friends are more important than our friendship," she'd say when I declined to cancel other plans. Sarah also began sharing negative opinions about me with mutual acquaintances from high school, claiming that she was worried about my social development and mental health. "Megan's become really clingy and desperate for attention," she told our former classmate Lisa. "I think she's having trouble making real friends in Chicago, so she's latching onto anyone who's nice to her." When Lisa told me about Sarah's comments, I realized that Sarah had been systematically undermining my reputation while positioning herself as a concerned friend who was trying to help me. I decided to distance myself from Sarah and focus on the healthy friendships I'd built in Chicago. I stopped reaching out for regular phone calls and declined most of her invitations to hang out. Sarah's reaction to my boundaries was immediate and intense. "Megan's become really weird and antisocial," she told mutual friends. "I think success went to her head and now she thinks she's too good for her real friends." "I'm worried about Megan," she said to another high school friend. "She's isolated herself from everyone who actually cares about her. Her Chicago friends don't really know her like we do." Sarah's campaign to paint me as socially confused and isolated continued for months, even after I'd made it clear that I needed space from our friendship. When our 10-year high school reunion was announced, I debated whether to attend. I knew Sarah would be there, and I was concerned about potential drama or awkward confrontations. But I ultimately decided to go because I was curious to reconnect with other classmates and show that I was thriving personally and professionally. The reunion was held at our old high school gymnasium, decorated with photos and memorabilia from our graduating class. About 50 of our 200 classmates attended, creating an intimate atmosphere where most conversations were happening in small groups. For the first hour, the reunion was exactly what I'd hoped for. I reconnected with former classmates, shared updates about careers and relationships, and enjoyed reminiscing about shared high school memories. Sarah arrived about an hour into the event and immediately began making rounds to different conversation groups. I noticed that she seemed to be steering conversations toward topics related to social connections and friendship dynamics. "It's so interesting to see how people's social lives turned out," I heard Sarah say to one group. "Some people who seemed popular in high school are actually quite lonely now. You can really tell who has genuine friends versus who just has superficial connections," she commented to another cluster of classmates. Sarah's comments seemed designed to set up a larger conversation about social authenticity and real versus fake friendships. I had a growing sense that she was building towards something more direct. About 2 hours into the reunion, Sarah approached the microphone that had been set up for informal speeches and toasts. "I'd like to share some thoughts about friendship and how people change after high school," Sarah announced to the room. Most classmates turned their attention to Sarah, assuming she was going to give a general reflection on our shared experiences growing up. "High school friendships are so pure because they're based on who you really are," Sarah began. "But some people struggle to maintain that authenticity as adults." I realized that Sarah was positioning her speech to be about me specifically, using the reunion as a platform to publicly criticize my social life and friendships. "Some people become so desperate for acceptance that they create fantasy versions of their social lives," Sarah continued, looking directly at me. "They convince themselves that superficial connections are real friendships." The room was becoming uncomfortable as classmates realized that Sarah's speech was targeting someone specific rather than offering general observations about post-graduation life. "Megan, for example, has always been delusional about her social connections," Sarah announced, making her target explicit. I felt my face burning with humiliation as 50 classmates turned to stare at me while Sarah continued her attack. "Nobody actually likes you, they just pretend to be nice," Sarah declared. "You're too clueless to realize that people are just tolerating you out of pity." The room fell completely silent. Reunion attendees were staring at Sarah in shock, then at me, trying to understand why this confrontation was happening. "Megan thinks she has all these great friends in Chicago, but it's all in her head," Sarah continued. "She's so desperate for acceptance that she misinterprets basic politeness as genuine affection." Sarah looked around the room as if expecting support for her assessment of my social delusions. "Someone needs to tell Megan the truth about her friendships before she embarrasses herself further. Nobody wants to be around someone so needy and clingy." That's when I reached for my phone. I had been part of a group chat with 6 friends from Chicago for over a year. Chat included daily conversations, shared photos, and ongoing discussions about plans, inside jokes, and mutual support through various life challenges. What Sarah didn't know was that this group chat had recently included several conversations about Sarah herself. "Sarah, since you've decided to make public claims about my friendships and social life, I think it's time to share some actual evidence about how people really feel." I opened the group chat and scrolled to find the relevant conversations from the past few months. "This is a group chat with 6 of my closest friends in Chicago," I announced to the room. "I'm going to read some recent messages so everyone can judge for themselves whether these relationships are real or just people pretending to be nice." I found the conversation thread from 3 weeks earlier when Sarah had been particularly manipulative about trying to interfere with my plans. "Here's a message from Jessica from last month," I read aloud. "Megan, I'm worried about your friend Sarah. She seems really toxic and controlling. Has she always been this way?" The room was completely silent as I continued reading. Here's a response from Amanda. "I've noticed that too. Sarah seems jealous of Megan's happiness and is trying to isolate her from us. It's classic manipulative behavior." I scrolled to find more recent messages. Here's one from Lisa. "Should we plan an intervention about Sarah? Megan deserves better friends than someone who constantly undermines her confidence." Sarah's face had gone completely white as I read messages that proved my friends were not only genuine but actively protective of me against Sarah's toxic behavior. "Here's a message from the group chat from last week," I continued. Katie wrote, "Megan is one of the most thoughtful and loyal friends I've ever had. I can't understand why Sarah is so threatened by our friendship. I found one more exchange that perfectly contradicted Sarah's claims about my social relationships. And here's yesterday's conversation. Rachel wrote, I'm so grateful Megan introduced us all to each other. She has this amazing ability to bring people together and create real community. I closed my phone and looked directly at Sarah. So when you claim that nobody actually likes me and that my friendships are based on pity, the evidence suggests otherwise. My friends aren't just genuine, they're actively concerned about protecting me from people who try to undermine my confidence. The room was completely silent. Sarah stood frozen at the microphone, unable to respond to the evidence I'd just presented. Sarah, the group chat also includes conversations about how to support me through your harassment campaign, I continued. My friends recognize manipulative behavior when they see it, and they've been helping me understand that your criticism says more about your issues than about my social capabilities. Several classmates began approaching me to express their shock at Sarah's behavior and their amazement at the supportive friendships I'd shared evidence of. Megan, I can't believe Sarah said those things about you, our former classmate Tom said. And those messages from your friends are beautiful. You clearly have amazing people in your life. Sarah's speech was completely inappropriate, added our former class president. But hearing about your friendships makes it obvious that you've built a wonderful social life. Sarah left the reunion immediately after my presentation of the group chat evidence. She gathered her things and exited without speaking to me or anyone else who had witnessed her public attack and subsequent humiliation. For the rest of the evening, classmates approached me to apologize for Sarah's behavior and express their admiration for how I'd handled the situation. I always thought Sarah was a little intense, but I had no idea she was actively trying to sabotage your friendships, one former classmate observed. The drive home gave me time to process what had happened. Sarah's public attack had been devastating, but the group chat evidence had provided perfect vindication for the authenticity of my Chicago friendships. I realized that Sarah's criticisms of my social life had never been based on genuine observations about my relationships. They'd been projections of her own insecurities and her inability to accept that I'd formed strong connections independent of her influence. The group chat messages I'd shared hadn't just defended my friendships. They'd revealed that my friends were perceptive enough to recognize Sarah's manipulative behavior and caring enough to protect me from its impact. The aftermath of the reunion confrontation created lasting changes in how I understood both toxic and healthy friendship dynamics. Word of Sarah's reunion speech spread quickly among our high school classmates, seriously damaging her reputation within our former social circle. I can't believe Sarah attacked Megan like that at the reunion, several classmates mentioned in follow-up conversations. And the way Megan responded with actual evidence was amazing. Sarah never apologized for her speech or acknowledged that her claims about my friendships had been completely wrong. Instead, she seemed to double down on her belief that my Chicago friends were somehow inauthentic. Megan's friends are just telling her what she wants to hear, Sarah told mutual acquaintances after the reunion. Real friends would be honest about her social limitations. Sarah's inability to accept that my friendships were genuine seemed to reveal deeper issues with her own understanding of authentic relationships and social connection. Several former classmates reached out to me privately to share their own experiences with Sarah's manipulative behavior over the years. Sarah always made me feel like I wasn't good enough to be her friend, one classmate admitted. I'm glad you stood up to her publicly. My relationship with Sarah officially ended after the reunion. We have no contact, and she no longer attempts to interfere with my social life or spread negative opinions about my friendships. The most ironic outcome is that the reunion incident actually strengthened my Chicago friendships. When I shared the story with my group chat, they were even more supportive and protective than before. We're so proud of how you handled that situation, Jessica wrote. Sarah's behavior just proved how lucky we are to have you as a friend. 6 months later, my Chicago friend group has grown even closer, and we've developed inside jokes about toxic reunion behavior and the importance of having receipts when people question your friendships. The experience taught me several important lessons about friendship, social manipulation, and the value of authentic relationships. First, people who constantly question your other friendships and claim that your social connections aren't real are often projecting their own insecurities about relationships. Second, genuine friends will recognize manipulative behavior and actively work to protect you from people who try to undermine your confidence or isolate you. Third, documentation and evidence are powerful tools for confronting false claims about your social life, especially when those claims are made publicly. Most importantly, the experience reinforced that healthy friendships are based on mutual support, genuine affection, and respect for each other's autonomy and happiness. Today, I'm grateful for the authentic friendships I've built and confident in my ability to recognize the difference between supportive and toxic relationship dynamics. Sarah's predictions about my social limitations have been thoroughly disproven, but more importantly, I've learned to trust my own perceptions about relationships rather than accepting others' judgments about my social capabilities. The reunion incident has become something of a cautionary tale among our former classmates about the dangers of public friendship attacks and the power of having genuine social connections to defend. If you've experienced former friends spreading lies about your social life or questioning the authenticity of your relationships, know that such behavior often reveals more about the critic's own relationship issues than about your actual social capabilities. Document your genuine connections, trust your instincts about healthy versus toxic relationships, and don't let others' insecurities dictate how you understand your own friendships. If you enjoyed this story of reunion drama and group chat vindication, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of toxic friendships getting exposed through their own evidence. Share your own experiences with manipulative friendships in the comments below. Have you ever had former friends spread lies about your social life or try to isolate you from other relationships? Remember that real friends will support your happiness and protect you from people who try to undermine your confidence, and sometimes the best response to friendship attacks is simply having the receipts that prove your relationships are genuine. Thank you for listening to my story of reunion vindication and group chat justice. Sometimes the best response to people who claim nobody likes you is evidence that proves how wrong they really are.